Kehilat Shalom. So we have had a bunch of small things going wrong this morning. People starting their aliyahs at the wrong time, whatever. And it began actually when I went into my office to get my materials for this morning, and my talit was not there, which is actually not a minor thing because this is like gorgeous and irreplaceable. I must have left it somewhere. I must have either left it in here or in the social hall last Shabbat, and Jose dutifully replaced it on the talis rack. And also, my sermon notes were not there, so which are even more valuable and irreplaceable. But there are, those of us who believe that if small things go wrong, that's okay, right? Because, right, some things like, I don't know how many people experience this, but inevitably, when you pack for a trip, you're going to get there and something is missing, right? And if it's a minor thing, that's good, right? Because at least it's not a major thing, although I will tell you that when Kelly and I were engaged, I was living in Baltimore and she was living in Atlanta, and I had a job that let me, travel fairly frequently, and I wound up one Friday afternoon in Atlanta with no underwear. And since then, whenever we go on a trip, Kelly packs my suitcase. All this by way of saying that I don't have my sermon notes on paper. I do have them on my phone, which doesn't want to open. No, I got it. Normally I would not do it this way, but what are you gonna do, right? So, Shabbat Shalom. And so, no, so anyway, so this Jewish and Christian kid were an observant Jewish and Christian kid talking about how they thank God for their meals. And the Jewish kid says, well, our main prayer for meals, right, Birkat Hamazon, it's actually after we eat. And the Christian kid says, oh, we don't have to wait until after we eat. We say the prayer before because I know that my mom is a good cook, right? But why do we say Birkat Hamazon after the meal, right? Why is the main prayer after the meal?
Because it talks about being satiated.
Right.
It talks about being satisfied or satiated. So you want to eat first to be satisfied.
But is that like because we think it makes sense, or is there something more than that?
Well, eat the Birkat Hamazon comes from eat it.
Birkat Hamazon says exactly that, right? Kakatu v'ahalta v'savata uverata, right? Which is in this parsha, right? You shall eat the ahalta, the savata, and be satisfied or be nourished, uverata, and bless. Eat, be satisfied, and bless. Okay, so we're Jews, so we read that stuff literally, right? Except, of course, where we don't, right? But the whole reason skip that part. The Talmud discusses the question of why we're obligated to say brachot, to say blessings, right? And the Talmud's answer is anyone who enjoys any of the things in this world and doesn't say a bracha, it's like you're stealing from God, right? In other words, God gives us these things, but there's a price tag. And the price tag is a bracha. So that's why we say brachot. But I'm not really satisfied with that answer, because does God really need our thanks? Is God sitting up there saying, oh, those Jews? I mean, he is sitting up there saying, oh, those Jews. But I don't think he's sitting up there saying, oh, those Jews, they didn't thank me for all the nice stuff that I did for them, right? I don't believe that that's the case, right? God doesn't need anything. So if that's the case, why are we commanded, because it's a mitzvah, why are we commanded to say brachot for all of the good things that we enjoy in life? Why? Lauren?
It's more for us, not for God, that we do it in the way it makes us feel and how it affects our day.
Okay, we do it, it's for us, how it makes us feel and how it affects, what did you say?
Yeah, like peace of mind. I think what she's trying to say.
All right, peace of mind, okay, all right, peace of mind. Lori?
I think it's also, you're also thanking and blessing the people, or basically the people who grew your food, or, provided the things that enabled you to have happiness and enjoy things in life.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thought, and I will tell you, when I lived in Connecticut and I was a member of the Rotary Club, and there was always an invocation before our meal, and, I was on the rotation, and and not me alone, most of us would say, bless this food, bless the hands that grew it, the hands that prepared it, et cetera, et cetera. So that certainly is important. I'm not exactly sure that that comes out of Jewish sources per se, because at the time that these sources existed, the same hands grew it, prepared it, served it, and ate it. But anyone else? Yeah.
Just please stop and think about it, so it's not, nothing's for granted, like anything, you've been going to the bathroom at work, okay?
Right, stop and think about it, and
And
don't
don't just.
take it for granted, to eat consciously, right? We're not animals, right? We don't leap on our food, right? Unless it's a wedding or a bar mitzvah and there's a buffet. But, and all of those are, I think, answers that make sense. In my opinion, it's also to inculcate certain character traits in us. There's a commentary called the Merotz Hasvi, and he says, if one wishes to be satisfied by the results of his labors, the ahalta, if he believes in the mighty and blesses, uberata, and thanks God for all he has received, then bisavata, you will be satisfied and sated, right? In other words, he flips the words, right? Instead of you shall eat and be satisfied and bless, you shall eat, bless, and then you'll be satisfied, because you gave thanks to God. But if you believe that I did this is because I'm so great, right? And everybody's coming up to me and saying, sir, you're amazing, right? Then you'll never be satisfied. As it says in Proverbs, the belly of the wicked is never satisfied. Rabbi Harold Kushner points out, and I'd ask you, I think it's next week, we bless the new month. And in that blessing, we ask God to give us a whole bunch of things, but one of them is Yirat Shamayim, reverent, literally means fear of heaven, but it means reverence for God. But here's the thing, we ask for Yirat Shamayim twice. Okay, and Rabbi Kushner points out, and look at it next week, the first Yirat Shamayim is after we ask God for Osher v'Chavod, wealth and honor. We ask for Yirat Shamayim, we ask for reverence for God, we ask for wealth and honor, and then we ask for reverence for God again. And Rabbi Kushner says, because it's actually easier to have reverence for God when you're poor than when you're rich, right? And see that, I mean, if you don't believe me, right? I mean, within the African-American community and within, like in the South, the white community as well, there's a stratification of Protestant denominations according to wealth, right? If you go to the Church of God in Christ, it's gonna be, wild holy roller stuff, right? And the people there are mostly poor, although you would not guess by the way they dress to go to church, because they have reverence for God. But if it's, Baptist, they're a little bit better off. If they're AME or AME Zion, all the more so, right? And if they're Methodists or UCC or Episcopalians, then they are fairly well off, and their worship is very, very staid. Right? And that used to be the case in this country too. Right? The Hasidim were poor, the Reformed Jews were well off, right? And I don't think that's accident. I think that poor people tend to have greater piety than wealthy people, right? And God says you're going to go into the land, and it's a wonderful land, and you're going to find that the resources enable you to become well off. But when you have eaten and are satisfied, bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. The verse that we're looking at, right? Ve'achalta v'sabata u'virachta et Adonai Elohecha. Bless your God for the good land he has given you. And then it goes on, be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God. And when you eat and are satisfied and you build fine houses and you have large flocks and silver and gold, your heart will become proud and you will forget God who brought you out of Egypt, and you will forget that you were slaves. And you might say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But you didn't build that. You didn't build that. That comes from God. Not to say that you didn't put effort into it, but your effort would have been nothing without the raw material that God provides. And this is 3,500 years ago, right? But it's still true today, right? Prominent people born on third base, convinced that they hit a triple, right? Self-made, they think they're self-made men, and they worship their supposed creator. And this is all the more so in American society, which is still air, and one of the great works of sociology is Max Weber's The Protestant Work Ethic, and it is at its height in the United States because of the Puritan Calvinist mentality that sees wealth as a sign of God's favor. And we still see that in our society. Oh, this person is very wealthy, so they must be bright. I'm not so sure, right? I'm not so sure that having a lot of wealth means you're bright. But if you're a Calvinist, God said, yes, God gave you that wealth because you are righteous in God's eyes, right? So, but Moses is not against affluence. He's not against affluence, but he's against affluence without memory. We have to remember that we were slaves in Egypt. He's against affluence without gratitude. Everything that we have comes from God. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said, when we forget God, we begin to lose our humanity. Attempting to be more than merely human, we become less. The result is idolatry of the nation, the state, the race, the class, the system, the party, or the tyrant. And Rabbi Sachs wrote this a long time ago. He didn't have any particular person in mind. But listen again, right? Idolatry of the nation, the state, the race, the class, the system, the party, or the tyrant. Idolatry never dies. It returns always in a new guise and always demanding human sacrifice. The prelude to disaster is the thought, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. Let's not fall into that trap. Yeah.
How come after we have a kiddish, something more maybe than cookies and wine, how come we don't say a prayer?
Well, you should, but the question of, like, this is a question of technical halacha. What we have is not really technically a suda where you say it as a group, because it's a buffet. It's not like a seated meal where the food is put on the table or served. Okay, so we're really each eating our own, but technically you actually should, if you've had bread before, you should save your katamazon. Okay, and if you haven't had the bread, but you've still eaten, there are other prayers that you would say. And I don't want to running late already, but the question of like what counts as bread and what counts as a meal, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, one of the favorite articles I ever read, and I can't put my finger on it, was the question, is pizza a meal? Bread, which requires netilat yadayim, washing your hands and saying bir kanamazon, or not, or is it a snack? And I'll just give you, because I found this fascinating, the bottom line. In Boston, one slice of pizza is a snack. But in New York, it's a meal. Okay, and therefore, if you're in New York, you gotta, and, you know, having grown up in New York and visited Boston not infrequently, absolutely, that is the correct conclusion. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom. We continue with, the Kaddish before Musaf, 155 or 428. The Musaf Amida begins on 156 or 430. We're gonna say the first two verses out